He was the silver screen's most fearless adventurer, the man who made millions believe in Robin Hood's daring courage and Captain Blood's swashbuckling charm. But in 1942, that heroic image shattered. Errol Flynn, Hollywood's golden rebel, was dragged into court, accused of statutory rape with 2 underage girls. The scandal gripped the nation, sending shockwaves through the dream factory and leaving his reputation forever stained. For the public, it was a story too sensational to ignore, the adored idol now portrayed as a dangerous libertine. Behind the studio's polished image of bravery and romance, Flynn's private world spiraled into rumors of debauchery, yacht parties soaked in alcohol, fleeting affairs, and whispered secrets that even Hollywood tried to hide. And then, as suddenly as his rise, Flynn's life ended in mystery. Dead at only 50, his passing sparked rumors of foul play and conspiracy. Was his death simply the final cost of a life lived too recklessly? Or was Hollywood's swashbuckler silenced by forces beyond his control? Errol Flynn's story is not just one of triumph and scandal. It is a tale of myth, downfall, and the unanswered question that lingers decades later. Was he a daring hero destroyed by excess? Or a victim of Hollywood's darkest shadows? Errol Leslie Thompson Flynn was born on June 20, 1909, in Hobart, Tasmania, a small island far removed from the glitter of Hollywood. His father, Theodore Thompson Flynn, was a respected marine biologist and university professor, a man of science and discipline. His mother, Morel Young, however, was of Irish descent and possessed a fiery spirit that clashed with the rigid expectations of the time. From these 2 very different parents, Errol inherited both intellect and rebellion, a dangerous combination for a boy who refused to be contained. From an early age, Flynn was restless, mischievous, and uncontrollable. Teachers described him as intelligent but defiant, more interested in stirring trouble than following rules. He was expelled from multiple schools, including Sydney Church of England Grammar School, for fighting, theft, and general unruliness. These early clashes with authority created a pattern that would define his adult life, an irresistible pull toward freedom, risk, and defiance of convention. Despite his privileged upbringing, Flynn never seemed to fit into the world his family wanted for him. His father dreamed of a son who would follow academia, but Errol's eyes were always on the horizon. He preferred the rugged outdoors of Tasmania, where he sailed, climbed, and chased thrills with reckless abandon. The sea in particular became his escape, its danger and vastness echoing the adventurous spirit that later lit up the screen. The relationship with his parents was complex. Theodore admired Errol's boldness but worried about his lack of direction, while Morel encouraged his untamed energy, fueling the rebel inside him. As a teenager, Flynn grew increasingly distant from home, already seeking adventure beyond the quiet confines of Hobart. These formative years in Tasmania were not the beginnings of a disciplined scholar, but of a wanderer. The boy who could not be contained in a classroom would soon take his hunger for danger across oceans. And though neither his parents nor his teachers could control him, Hollywood would one day embrace that recklessness as its greatest weapon. Errol Flynn's education was a story of constant rebellion. Though his father hoped he would follow a path of science, Flynn seemed determined to sabotage every chance given to him. He was expelled not just once but from multiple prestigious schools in Australia and England. His offenses ranged from fighting to theft, and even a notorious incident where he allegedly set a laboratory on fire. Teachers saw flashes of brilliance but concluded that Errol had no respect for discipline or authority. By his late teens, Flynn abandoned the traditional academic route altogether. Instead, he threw himself into the unpredictable world of real-life adventure. He worked as a clerk, a junior overseer on a tobacco plantation in New Guinea, and even dabbled in gold prospecting. These jobs rarely lasted long, either because Flynn grew restless or because his reckless behavior caught up with him. But each failed attempt added to his legend, shaping him into the rugged, fearless persona that would later captivate audiences. His time in New Guinea, in particular, was transformative. The jungles were harsh and unforgiving, demanding physical resilience and daring spirit. Flynn not only survived but seemed to thrive, returning with wild stories of danger and survival. This period burnished the aura of adventure that became inseparable from his Hollywood image. But fate, as always, had other plans. In 1933, Flynn found himself in Sydney, restless and broke, when he joined a local theatre group almost by chance. Despite having no formal training, he possessed a raw magnetism that audiences could not ignore. His tall frame, striking good looks, and natural charisma made him stand out immediately. That same year, he was cast in a low-budget Australian film, In the Wake of the Bounty, playing Fletcher Christian, the same rebellious figure from the mutiny on the Bounty legend he often claimed as part of his ancestry. Though the film itself was unremarkable, it marked Flynn's first real step into acting. On screen, his restless energy finally found a home. With nothing to lose and ambition burning within him, Flynn set sail for England to pursue acting more seriously. He had no formal credentials, no connections, and no guarantees. What he did have was audacity, charm, and an instinct for seizing opportunity. The boy who could not be contained in school or on a plantation was now about to test himself in the heart of theater and cinema. When Errol Flynn arrived in England in the early 1930s, he was just another drifter chasing opportunity. He joined the Northampton Repertory Theatre, where he began to learn the discipline of stage acting. Though raw and inexperienced, Flynn's striking looks, athletic grace, and restless energy made him unforgettable. He was not yet polished, but he had something the camera could not resist. Fate intervened when a Warner Brothers talent scout spotted Flynn and brought him to Hollywood in 1935. At first, the studio gave him small, forgettable roles, but then, fortune changed in an instant. Warner Brothers needed a last-minute replacement for their ambitious pirate adventure Captain Blood. Flynn was cast in the lead, a gamble that would change his life forever. When Captain Blood premiered in 1935, audiences were stunned. Here was a newcomer who seemed born for the role of a daring pirate. Flynn's swordplay was effortless, his charm intoxicating, his presence magnetic. Overnight, he became a star. Critics compared him to Douglas Fairbanks, but many believed Flynn brought something even more authentic, the reckless spirit of a true adventurer. Just 3 years later, The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, elevated him to immortal status. Draped in Lincoln green, Flynn embodied the outlaw hero with unmatched vitality. The film was a triumph, a timeless classic of Hollywood's golden age, and it sealed his reputation as the screen's ultimate swashbuckler. Paired with Olivia de Havilland, Flynn's charisma burned so brightly that their partnership became legendary. From 1936 to the early 1940s, Flynn's star only rose higher. Films like The Charge of the Light Brigade, 1936, Dodge City, 1939, and They Died with Their Boots On, 1941, showcased his versatility in both adventure epics and westerns. He was Warner Brothers' golden asset, the man who could draw audiences around the world with nothing more than a smile and a sword. But fame was a double-edged sword. The very qualities that made him irresistible on screen, his daring, his arrogance, his hunger for risk, also fed his off-screen excesses. While audiences saw a flawless hero, those closest to him whispered of a man living dangerously, indulging recklessly, and tempting scandal at every turn. For now, though, Hollywood adored him. The boy who once wandered aimlessly through jungles and plantations had conquered the greatest stage of all. Errol Flynn was not just a star, he was a legend in the making. If Errol Flynn's career was built on sword fights and daring escapes, his private life was a battlefield of its own, fueled by passion, jealousy, and endless scandal. His first great love story began in 1935, when Flynn married French actress Lily Damita. Just as his career was taking off, their marriage was fiery, stormy, and famously volatile. Both had explosive tempers, and their quarrels often made headlines. Yet beneath the chaos was a deep connection, a passion that burned as brightly as it destroyed. After nearly 7 years of constant battles, they divorced in 1942. The separation left Flynn financially drained. forced to pay a costly settlement that would haunt him for years. Still, Flynn was never without women. His magnetism drew admirers wherever he went, and he rarely resisted. In 1943, he married Nora Eddington, a 19-year-old who worked at a courthouse where Flynn was dealing with his legal troubles. Their marriage seemed like a chance for renewal. Together, they had 2 daughters, and for a moment, Flynn appeared to settle into family life. But Hollywood's swashbuckler was not built for domesticity. His infidelity and reckless lifestyle tore the marriage apart, leading to their divorce in 1949. His third and final marriage was to actress Patrice Wymore in 1950. Unlike his previous wives, Wymore stood by him through much of his decline. They had 1 daughter, and while their marriage endured until his death, it was far from serene. Flynn's drinking, affairs, and constant scandals overshadowed any chance of stability. Yet Wymore later remembered him not only as a troubled man but as someone who could be tender, charming, and unforgettable. Beyond his marriages, Flynn's love life was a whirlwind of affairs, some real, others rumored. He was linked to countless women, from actresses to socialites, each story adding to his reputation as one of Hollywood's most notorious womanizers. For some, he was a romantic rebel who lived without restraint. For others, he was reckless, selfish, and destructive. What is certain is that love, for Flynn, was never calm. It was as wild and unpredictable as the roles he played. Just as he leapt into danger on screen, he leapt headlong into affairs and marriages, without hesitation, and often without thought of the consequences. By the early 1940s, Errol Flynn was at the peak of his fame. He was Warner Brothers' golden star, adored by millions, and one of the most bankable names in Hollywood. But in 1942, everything changed. Flynn's life collided with one of the most shocking scandals in Hollywood history. That year, he was accused of statutory rape by 2 teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley. The allegations sent shockwaves across the nation. For the public, it was almost impossible to reconcile. How could the man who embodied bravery and romance on screen be facing charges of sexual misconduct? The trial quickly became a media spectacle. Its every detail splashed across headlines. Inside the courtroom, Flynn maintained his composure, even charm. His defense lawyers argued that the accusations were motivated by opportunism and the lure of his fame. The prosecution painted him as a dangerous libertine, a man who believed his celebrity placed him above the law. Outside, crowds of fans gathered daily, some shouting their support, others condemning him. The trial dragged on for weeks, gripping America in a frenzy. Finally, in February 1943, the verdict was delivered. Flynn was acquitted on all charges. The courtroom erupted, and many of his fans wept with relief. Legally, he was free, but in the court of public opinion, the damage was irreversible. The phrase, "in like Flynn," entered popular culture, at once a sly nod to his sexual reputation and a lasting reminder of the scandal. Though acquitted, his name was now inseparable from whispers of excess, seduction, and corruption, and the trial was not the only shadow over his life. Even before and after the case, Flynn's yacht, the Zaka, became infamous for wild parties filled with alcohol, drugs, and fleeting affairs. Stories circulated of nights that blurred morality and decency, each tale fueling his reputation as Hollywood's most notorious libertine. Warner Brothers tried to protect him, pushing him into more films and keeping his heroic image alive. But the mask was slipping. Hollywood's golden rebel had become a lightning rod for scandal, and his personal demons, drinking, drug use, reckless indulgence, were beginning to consume him. What had once been his greatest strength, his untamed, reckless spirit, was now tearing his life apart. Flynn had survived the courtroom, but the scandal marked the beginning of his downfall. The 1942 trial left Errol Flynn legally free, but personally and professionally scarred. While studios continued to cast him in major films, the glow of his untouchable hero image had dimmed. Some audiences still adored him, but others could not forget the scandal. The public's perception of Flynn had shifted. He was no longer just Hollywood's swashbuckler, he was its most notorious libertine. Flynn tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. Throughout the mid-1940s, he starred in films like Objective, Burma, 1945, and Adventures of Don Juan, 1948. Roles that echoed his earlier glory. But the man behind the costume was slipping. Years of relentless indulgence, drinking, womanizing, drugs, began to erode not only his health but also his discipline as an actor. He became unreliable on set, sometimes arriving late or intoxicated, frustrating directors and producers. By his 40s, Flynn looked far older than his years. The once athletic frame that had leapt across screens with a sword in hand was bloated, tired, and ravaged by excess. His charisma remained, but it was dimmed, shadowed by self-destruction. Still, Flynn was not without moments of redemption. In the late 1950s, he surprised critics with performances that revealed a depth many had overlooked. In The Sun Also Rises, 1957, he played an aging, broken man with raw authenticity. Critics who had once dismissed him as merely a pretty face now recognized a genuine, if troubled, talent. He also took on the role of John Barrymore in Too Much, Too Soon, 1958, a haunting portrayal of another fallen star. A role that mirrored his own decline so closely it was almost painful to watch. He even turned to writing, publishing his autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, which shocked and fascinated readers with its unapologetic confessions of indulgence. The book cemented his reputation as Hollywood's unrepentant rebel, a man who lived without restraint and refused to apologize for it. But no matter how he tried, Flynn could never truly stage a full comeback. The industry was changing, new stars were rising, and the studio system that had protected him was fading. He remained a figure both admired and pitied, still capable of brilliance, but irreparably damaged by his own excesses. For Flynn, the curtain had not yet fallen, but the final act of his story was drawing near, and it would be as dramatic and mysterious as the roles that made him famous. By the late 1950s, Errol Flynn was only 50 in years, but his body told a harsher truth. Decades of drinking, drugs, and reckless living had carved deep lines into his once handsome face. The youthful adventurer who had once swung from chandeliers and led armies into battle on screen now looked like an old man, worn, tired, and ravaged by excess. And yet, the spark of his charm never truly faded. Friends recalled how, even in his decline, Flynn could still command a room with a story, a smile, or a flash of his famous wit. He had lived boldly, unapologetically, and on his own terms. But the cost was finally catching up with him. On October 14, 1959, while in Vancouver with his teenage companion Beverly Odland, Flynn collapsed suddenly. The official cause was a heart attack, compounded by cirrhosis of the liver and the accumulated toll of years of abuse. He was just 50 years old. The news stunned Hollywood. One of its brightest and most reckless stars was gone. But death did not silence the whispers. Some said it was inevitable, the tragic end of a man who had lived too hard. Others suspected foul play, hinting that Flynn carried secrets too dangerous to survive. Conspiracy theories swirled, adding yet another layer of mystery to his legend. Today, Errol Flynn remains one of the most fascinating paradoxes of Hollywood's golden age. On screen, he was immortal, a symbol of bravery, romance, and adventure. Off-screen, he was reckless, scandalous, and self-destructive. His autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, leaves behind a portrait of a man unashamed of his excesses, determined to live as fiercely as the characters he portrayed. And so the question lingers, was Errol Flynn the daring hero we wanted? Or the cautionary tale Hollywood needed? Perhaps he was both, a man who lived as if the world were a stage, and who, even in death, refused to stop playing the role of Hollywood's most dangerous rebel.